Hello and welcome to WION The World is One. I'm Ghadi Francis and this is the West Asia Post, our weekly show where we bring you all the latest updates from the world's most volatile region. The signs in Vienna are like déjà vu. The United States warns of crippling sanctions. Iran drags out the talks and enriches uranium. Israel threatens war. The Europeans pledge and negotiate, and the Arabs watch from the sidelines. But what if they fail to save the historic JCPOA?
7 rounds of talks, countless negotiations. Allegations, counter-allegations, threats of attacks. The Iran nuclear deal has seen a lot, but countries in Vienna are still scrambling to save it. They are back after a hiatus of 5 months. Negotiations have resumed, but contradictions remain. The United States wants Iran to comply. Iran instead wants the sanctions lifted.
We believe a diplomatic resolution offers the best path to avoiding a nuclear crisis. However, given the ongoing advances in Iran's nuclear program, the President has asked his team to be prepared in the event that diplomacy fails. And we must turn to other options, and that requires preparations.
We insist on the effective removal of all sanctions at once and in a verifiable manner. The way that the U.S. has treated its international obligations has necessitated such an approach.
As for the European powers negotiating, they are caught in the middle. Iran had presented 2 documents containing its proposals, but the E3 have rejected it as incompatible with the terms of the deal. But just when the collapse of the JCPOA looked all but inevitable, Iran struck a deal with the UN nuclear watchdog. It was to allow cameras at its nuclear site. The decision will see cameras put back at Karaj, which came under attack in June. But while Tehran has allowed for cameras, it won't allow them to access any images. The IAEA chief says that Iran and the body must work together.
We have to work together. They must work together. I will make sure that they understand that in us they will have a partner, a serious professional partner that will allow them and any other country to play its role in the international community in the right way.
Earlier this week, it looked like the deal was near collapse. The United States started preparing for alternatives, a contingency plan if the JCPOA cannot be restored. As for Israel, they have urged a hard line against Iran. Israel is even preparing itself for a possible military alternative. In Vienna, the talks are headed for a pause. They say there has been good progress and there will be a break for a few days. So that's where things stand now. America and Iran want to seal the deal. There is a need to salvage the historic JCPOA. But it's rarely as easy with the baggage of decades-old mistrust and hatred. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
Don't go anywhere, we have a lot more lined up for you in this edition of the West Asia Post. But first, as usual, let's take a look at what else is making the headlines across West Asia.
The US says it is ready to move forward with the sale of F-35 fighter jets and drones to the United Arab Emirates. This after Abu Dhabi told Washington it would suspend talks on the $23 billion deal. Turkey and the United Arab Emirates aim to deepen cooperation after talks in Dubai between Turkey's foreign minister and UAE prime minister. This comes as the rivals stepped up diplomacy to mend strained ties after years of animosity. Naftali Bennett becomes the first Israeli Prime Minister to visit the United Arab Emirates, meeting Crown Prince Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. The two released a joint statement calling Bennett's trip another milestone in the development of warm relations. The Palestinian embroidery has been added to the UNESCO Cultural Heritage List. The Palestinian Prime Minister has welcomed the move by the UN agency as an important step to protect Palestinian identity, heritage, and narrative. Medicine prices in Lebanon have soared as the government has largely removed subsidies. Many patients now can't afford the treatment they need in a country where nearly 80% of the people already live below the poverty line.
An attack on one is an attack on all. This was the clarion call by the GCC at the 42nd summit. Security and strategic ties top the agenda. The summit is expected to stress cohesion after a deep rift at a time of regional concern over Iran and rising economic rivalry within the oil-producing bloc. Let's take a look.
Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. Together, they form the Gulf Cooperation Council, or the GCC, a union of Arab states. From embargo to embrace, the Gulf nations have come a long way. This week, they met for the 42nd GCC Annual Summit, the first since the historic Al-Ula Agreement in January. In January this year, a 3-year-old rift came to an end. Saudi Arabia opened its doors for Qatar. It opened a new era of possibilities. But how did it start? The rift began in 2017. Saudi-led Gulf Cooperation Council severed ties with Qatar. This was after an article published by hackers. It accused Qatar of criticizing the mounting anti-Iran sentiment. While Qatar was quick to take down the fake article, the damage had already been done. The Gulf nations imposed a blockade on Qatar, cutting off diplomatic and trade ties and imposing a land, sea and air embargo on the country. They accused Qatar of supporting terrorism. Doha repeatedly rejected the accusations as baseless. But now, with the 42nd GCC summit, is the conflict all but over? For many, it is a new era of pragmatism. In focus are three main issues: the Iran nuclear talks in Vienna, economic ties amid a pandemic, and combating climate change. The idea is that of solidarity, of a united Arab world. The Gulf Cooperation Council says an attack on one will be an attack on all.
It is an impenetrable wall. We will not allow anything that threatens collective security and the stability of our countries and societies. This subject is not up for discussion, and the GCC countries will do everything they can to protect its collective security. The collective security is inseparable.
The summit comes at a time when talks to save the JCPOA are underway in Vienna. The goal was to discuss how to deal with Iran as well as the war in Yemen, Tehran's links with the Houthi rebels, and the role of Iran-linked groups in West Asia.
The kingdom stresses the importance of dealing seriously and effectively with the Iranian nuclear and missile program in a way that contributes to achieving regional and international security and stability.
Lebanon's Hezbollah featured heavily in the talks. It comes amid strained ties between Lebanon and the Gulf states. The summit called for prohibiting Hezbollah from carrying out its activities that threaten the stability of the Arab world.
We call to prevent the terrorist Hezbollah from conducting terrorist operations and supporting militias and terrorist groups which destabilize the Arab countries, in addition to the importance of strengthening the role of the Lebanese army and the necessity of limiting arms to legitimate state institutions.
But not just Iran. The 42nd GCC summit comes at a time of rapprochement. In focus were long-standing projects, including the implementation of the Gulf Customs Union, a common market, economic citizenship, and the construction of a Gulf rail network. The focus of the summit was on security and strategic ties, policies that benefit all, and a united Arab world against any adversity. And with this 42nd GCC summit, it looks like the Arab divorce is finally coming to an end. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
The Turkish lira has fallen to a new record low. The central bank has voted to cut the country's key interest rate. Inflation in Turkey is now at more than 21%, rising steadily as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has refused to raise rates. We tell you more.
It has been a rough month for the Turkish lira. The lira plunged to a record low yet again after the central bank cut rates for the fourth time in just a month. This is the latest salvo fired by the central bank. In President Erdogan's economic war of independence, the reduction of the rate led the lira to collapse. With annual inflation at an all-time high of 21%. The latest cut means that the lira shed more than half its value since 2021. In 2016, a dollar could buy 3 liras. On January the 1st, it was 7.43 liras. On the 16th of December, it was worth 15.5 liras. The continuing rate cuts is an unorthodox approach. Heralding it is Turkey's Erdogan. The leader has called for patience. He says his approach will ultimately make Turkey less dependent.
We will not let our Turkish lira to be swallowed. There are some troubles at the moment and we will get over them as soon as possible. Nobody should doubt that.
The Turkish leader is trying to fight spiraling inflation by bringing down borrowing costs, the exact opposite of what countries usually do in similar situations. It is an approach that has proven very costly, especially for the citizens of Turkey. It has wiped out the value of people's savings, throwing swathes of the society below the official poverty line.
I'm retired and I can't make ends meet. And because I can't make ends meet, what do? People are forced to come and buy cheap bread here. Bread is 3 lira, 3.5 lira at bakeries. We buy bread here for 1.25 lira. We are cutting back on everything. It's that simple.
This is now a common sight in Turkey. Queues of people waiting to buy bread at a subsidized price. In the city's Sultan Ghazi district, a traditional stronghold for Erdogan's AK party, people say that growing economic woes left them no choice.
The government must change because for 20 years there has been the same system, the same politics and the same process. This is a district where AK party voters are heavily residing. Most people here may say, "Long live my Sultan," but that period is over.
For Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu, the queues are a sign of a failing government, one that needs to be changed. İmamoğlu has long been seen as a potential challenger to Erdogan.
This current process is not merely an economic crisis. I want to underline that this is a political crisis. I see this as a reflection of the inability to run the country.
Turkey faces many challenges today. Its economy is at its weakest. Inflation is high. It is diplomatically isolated from the West. There is public anger against Erdogan. The president is losing support. The man who set out to head an Islamic caliphate is struggling to keep his empire. West Asia Bureau, WION, World is One.
The hope for a better future. It's what we all want. But sometimes this hope can be the beginning of a journey, a dangerous one through unsafe terrain. A journey that could leave many stranded, stuck at the border of the country they dream about living in. This is happening all across West Asia. Here's a WION special report on what migrants go through.
Ziad Hilwe knew his family might die on the way, but he says the risk was worth it. All he wanted was a new start with his wife and 3 kids, away from the daily humiliation in Lebanon. Lebanon's economic meltdown had destroyed him. It came to the point where he could no longer afford basic goods like milk and diapers for his children.
الفكرة اللي أنا فكرت فيها إنه عويش بس عويش هيك بس عم موت على البطيء هون. عرفت كيف؟ كنا قاعدين بمحل وفي عالم حكوا قدامنا إنه في طلعة إيطالية. جيت بعت هالأغراض بعت بيتي ورحت عند الزلمة اعطيته المسيات اللي طلبها مني. بعد ما اعطيته المسيات اللي طلبها مني قال لي بيوم كذا بدنا نلتقى بمحل.
For years, Lebanon has been a host for refugees, but now it is a departure point. But for many like Ziad Hilwe, it is a failed mission. The young father's hopes were shattered when the boat broke down in the Mediterranean Sea. This was hours after they set off from the outskirts of Lebanon's port city of Tripoli.
صدمة أكيد يعني واد صار خلص قطع لبنان يعني قطع الزل. أنا بعتبره لإلي أنا قطعت الزل. وقت ما قطعت الزل انبسطت وصرت أضحك أنا ووليدي ومرتي يعني. بس وقت ما نقطع فينا هون شفت الدنيا سوداء بقى قدامي، يعني شفت الدمار، قلت رجعت اتدمرت أنا أكثر مني مدمر. وقت وصلت لهون إني دمت عيني وقت وصلت باب المرفأ إنه أنا اتدمرت على الآخر.
This is a tale repeated many times across West Asia. Thousands of migrants stuck at sea and at borders. What they hoped for was a better future, one far away from the conflicts in their countries, but instead they have become pawns in the geopolitical conflict, surrounded by barbed wire fences and countries who want to send them back. In Iraq, thousands were provided with tourist visas for Belarus. Documents suggest that travel agencies in West Asia were working in partnership with tour operators in Belarus. All the migrants had to do was take a flight to Belarus. From there, they could just drive down to the border. It sounds very simple. That is what the migrants were made to believe as well. Many of them were lured by Belarusian travel bureaus. Middlemen offered them a passage to the European Union. The migrants dreamt of a better future. Instead, what they got was this: dangerous seas, freezing cold, days of camping in sub-zero temperatures, dangerous terrains, razor wire fences, and hostile border guards that refuse to let them in. For many of them, it is a life in limbo. They want a better life, but they are caught between the fear of returning to their conflict-ridden homelands and the hope of a better life ahead. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
Christmas is near, and West Asia is decking up for the festive season. In focus is an 8-year-long restoration process. The Church of Nativity is all ready to welcome visitors, as the oldest church in the Holy Land hopes for an influx of tourists. Let's take a look.
The Church of Nativity, the oldest church in the Holy Land. For many Christians, it is the birthplace of Jesus. They believe he was born here in a manger. It was built around 330 AD and is home to Eastern Orthodox, Armenian Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches. For 500 years, the church did not undergo any renovation. Rainwater was running down the walls, affecting the structure, the mosaics, the frescoes and also the floor.
There were ongoing problems resulting from rainwater, which ran down the walls of the church. It affected the structure, it affected the mosaics, it affected the frescoes and the floors. There was a lot of work done for these weather factors. There is also the smoke rising from the candles.
In 2013, the church started its renovation. The focus was on cleaning and restoration. The main thing that needed to be fixed was the roof, to stop the damaging influx of rainwater every winter. The process is finally completed after 8 years, just in time for the festive season in the Holy Land. The cost around $15 million. The renovations were overseen by a Palestinian committee. The main hall of the Church of Nativity is shared between 3 different Christian factions. Renovations in each Christian faction sections were being overseen separately, including the restoration of the iconostasis in the Greek Orthodox quarter.
You can see the mosaic, before you can't see them. Actually it was all black, the walls, the windows, the floor even, it's really disaster. But now it looks much better. The people and the pilgrims and the tourists can see the much details around this church, and actually they can feel the spirits in this church.
The plan is to attract more and more tourists. During Christmas, the Church of Nativity is usually packed full of tourists on guided tours. But last year, the pandemic played a spoilsport. This time, they're hoping for a resurgence of tourists. West Asia Bureau, WION World is One.
That's all we have for you on this episode of the West Asia Post. I will see you next week with a brand new lineup, bringing you more stories from the world's most volatile region. Until then, stay safe. I'm Ghadi Francis, coming to you from Lebanon, and you're watching WION World is One.